Hello and welcome to 1 Hour SaaS. My name is Mubashir Iqbal. You can call me Mubs. I am building a SaaS business in just 1 hour a day. I'm building Podcast Ping, a monitoring system built just for podcasters. This is update for hour number 19. So today I was going to carry on just doing some of the work that we did yesterday in terms of sending emails and checking if feeds were up, or what feeds were up and websites were up and all that kind of stuff. But really didn't feel like working today. Just been a stressful day and didn't feel like it. But I did do something so instead of doing that, which felt like work, I decided I was going to do something a little bit more fun. So I tweeted this over the weekend, but I found this new project that probably launched a while ago, but it's new to me. I found it fairly recently. It's this thing called Podcastindex, and it's kind of an alternative to the podcast directories that are out there, things like iTunes and Spotify and those that have every podcast under the sun in there. And Podcastindex is, it's an open project to try and build a similar kind of database that people can submit their podcast to. They don't have to, fall in line with whatever iTunes says a podcast should or should not be, etc. And so I thought it might be a fun little exercise to see if we could integrate with Podcastindex in our search when we're adding podcasts instead of iTunes. And we might eventually just strip out iTunes entirely, but for now we'll leave both iTunes and Podcastindex in there if people want to use that. So I basically just took the class that I wrote for the iTunes search and just kind of modified that a little bit so that it could work in a similar fashion to Podcastindex instead. So let me switch to code mode and just kind of show you basically what I got accomplished and kind of how it works as well under the hood. So when you now go to podcast ping test, and so these are the podcasts that I have added, and you can see I've been testing a fair bit. But now when you click on add a new podcast, you now kind of get this new drop down here about where you want to search. So there's Podcastindex, and then there's obviously iTunes as well. So you can now just search in here for indie hackers. And now you kind of see in Podcastindex there's only one that matched this search criteria. And so nobody submitted the Diary of an Indie Hacker to the Podcastindex. Which is fair enough. And then, so obviously if I go back, you can see that we have just the one there. And then it works the same way. So you select that and then off you go. It's created it and you can carry on managing that the same way. You can see in here, this is the one that just got added here. And we still have the iTunes ID because Podcastindex returns the iTunes ID if it has it. And so we have the feed URL, the website URL, the image as well. And then obviously at the end here, I added this new field, which is the Podcastindex ID. And so if we found it on Podcastindex, we now know what the ID is of that podcast on Podcastindex as well. That was about it for today. I'm just going to show you quickly just kind of what that API looks like. So here's the Podcastindex search. And so it looks very similar. There's a base URL. There's a method for building the search queries. And this just constructs all of the headers that we need to pass into Podcastindex to make sure that we're authorized to run the search and kind of other things like that. As far as I'm aware, there's no cost for that, and they don't have any plans to charge for the API or kind of anything like that. So it sounds like an awesome project. So figured I would integrate it. So that's very simple class there, just to kind of run the search, and it just spits back the same responses. And then I just kind of refactored some of the search stuff in terms of having not just the iTunes ID now, we also have the podcast index, and where we pull the fields from the response isn't all the same as well. So I just went through and updated the forms to kind of make that all work. So that's it. That's it for today. Keeping it short. Didn't feel like work in the end, so that was good. And that's just something I do sometimes, is like, if I feel like doing something but I'm not really in the mood for it, rather than trying to force it and do something just for the sake of it. I could have just taken the night off too, and that would have been fine as well, but I figured this was something I did want to do, but I didn't have the particular schedule in mind for implementing that, and so I figured I would do it today instead, when I didn't feel like doing anything else. That's it for today, and see you next time.